everybody. So today we're going to talk about a topic that I have been meaning to talk about for the longest time, and that's quiet luxury. And I feel like it's really been a thing probably since like 2020, and I just have seen it kind of develop into this new trend slash idea of dressing or slash philosophy of dressing, and I've been meaning to kind of give my thoughts on it. Haven't gotten around to it until now, but I want to speak on it. And this might be a bit of a controversial opinion, but I wanted to talk about why I hate quiet luxury and why I think that it is not a style choice that I would ever make in my own personal like style slash wardrobe slash whatever. I just wanted to speak to that and why I think other styles like maximalism and maybe even minimalism would attract me way more than quiet luxury. And first, as I kind of started to get in with these videos, I'm going to do a little history about quiet luxury and how it started. Then I'm going to get into more of my opinion so that I can like help flesh out the ideas a little more. So basically, quiet luxury kind of developed out of a few modern trends that I noticed in my research, one of which was this show Succession that was really popular and kind of talked about like the ultra wealthy, and they like basically followed the drama with this group, but also it talked about their style. Well, they showed their style, like the actors and actresses in the show. It had their style, and a lot of people like really were inspired by it, and that's kind of where it pulled from. And then there were a couple other events that happened that kind of sparked this interest in quiet luxury. Another was Gwyneth Paltrow's wardrobe during a civil court case that she was at in, I think, Utah. And people saw her style and were like kind of building off of this. But basically, quiet luxury is like the idea of simplicity. The idea of simplicity, not much color variation, not much like a more muted kind of toned down look where it's not, logomania, which is a kind of a trend it distances itself from, which is like the wearing of logos. It's not flashy, kind of bright colors. It's very like, it draws a lot from, I would guess, like a Protestant wardrobe of like navies, beiges, whites, all these other things. And obviously, as you can see today, I dress in like the complete opposite of that, because one thing I'm going to say first is I would never get behind a trend that made color kind of like this gaudy thing. I am obsessed with color, and I love color in everything. Like, I plan on doing like a house tour at some point, and you'll see I have so much color everywhere. Like, color is what I live by. So that was one instant thing that I was like, nah, I can't do this. I ain't about this life. Like, and it's kind of like these colors, and it's not even just the colors though, it's also like the things that you're wearing. So instead of having a shirt that has Chanel all over it, you're going to have a bag that's very well designed, has really nice hems, has really good stitching, and just from the superior quality of the item, you can tell that this person has taste and style, is wealthy, and just because of like the quality of their clothes. So quiet luxury focuses on getting like really good quality items and really superior quality items that are simple, like a white shirt, but that would signal to others like through their tailoring, their design, and the cut, that it is a very expensive item. Not necessarily very well made item, I should say. And to me, I honestly think there's two directions that quiet luxury kind of developed in like current times from, and one would be a response to recession, because when buying is low, people do tend to become more tight-fisted with what they're shopping with. They tend to become more conservative with their buying practices, not spending as much money. We all know this from economics. And like the response to like a potential depression, perhaps, and people tend to be more conservative. And it also, I think, in my opinion, I'm a Gen Z, and I think like Gen Z, maybe a little bit of millennials, kind of grew up with this idea of like a pick me. And I don't necessarily think that's what quiet luxury is, but I do notice that some people in quiet luxury kind of mirror that philosophy, I guess, where it's like everybody else is so like so needing attention from other people. I'm gonna be, simple, delicate, and my style's gonna be just so simple but refined, and like I don't need all the colors, I don't need all the jewelry. I'm just going to be simple, and that's how I am elegant. And it's just kind of like this like little pedestal thing that I feel like is, I don't know, like it reminds me of that kind of attitude, and I just feel like it's a bit conceited. Um, but basically, because I kept saying I was going to get in the history of this, I didn't. Quiet luxury is very much something that's always been around but had different names throughout history. And I would say the most recent pull that quiet luxury comes from is the idea of old money. And like the existence of old money and how old money shows its wealth and distinguishes itself from rich money, new money, or the middle class, the working class, kind of old money as this concept of a style, a lifestyle, a way of being, and how it shows itself being different from others. And I would say in recent history, kind of dating back to perhaps even like the 1700s, old money predated the American Revolution in the US, and the people who kind of started out with a lot of money, based off of what they had been able to acquire in the colonies. These would be like plantation owners, slave traders, ship owners, fur traders, all these kind of different people who migrated from Western European countries to the US to kind of build their own fortunes, and found their little pockets of ways of making money on the what we now know as the US, and started in these different ways. And a source of their wealth, a major source of their wealth, especially for plantation owners, was vast tracts of land that were bequeathed to them by either their ancestors or the crown. That would be the British, and kind of these amounts of land that they were able to acquire from those two different lineages. Either the crown gave it to them or their ancestors. And from that, they were able to make a lot of money and kind of situate themselves as a ruling class in a new country slash concept at the time, but country now. And then, so basically, they throughout history, throughout U.S. history, these kinds of people who have always been here have found different avenues for building wealth that kind of snowballed it from what it was in the beginning to what it could be now, and just had all these different accesses. And throughout time, some of these families lost money through like maybe an ancestor who gambled, or went into a business venture that was very not lucrative and they lost them out, or they were able to get into different avenues and expand their wealth, kind of just this like in and out. But that because of their lineage and their inheritances, they were able to kind of maintain this wealth throughout the history. And so during a period where old money kind of saw a shrinking of its wealth too was during the Emancipation right after the Civil War, and during the Reconstruction era, because a lot of that land was given to what at the time like freed slaves and stuff like that. So, freed enslaved people. And so, but after the Reconstruction period was ended, a lot of this old money was able to get their money back, back in place and their inheritances squared away through kind of the installment of sharecropping and other ideas such as that. And this is more of like the land owning in terms of like industry, such as like fur traders and ship traders. They were expanding into more of the industrial side and kind of the installment of different factories and an immigrant class that was coming in, working in these factories on the textiles that were being produced from the landowners. So it's kind of this whole ramping up that had started in the beginning but allowed wealth to just become kind of ridiculous. But as we see during an industrial period, there was a lot of new money that came out. You had the Rockefellers at this time. Sorry, I wrote their names down. I'm trying to make sure I had them. Oh, okay, the Rockefellers. You know, these are major names that a lot of people would recognize as new money at the time, which was the Rockefellers, which would now be probably considered old money. The Vanderbilts, Henry Flager, Carnegie, a bunch of other names like that. And so this would be around like the turn of the century, like 20th century, 19th century to 20th century. And so you had this new money kind of flooding into a situation where old money had been for the longest time. And so the distinguishing factor was lineage. Oh, how long have you been in this place? And so all these kinds of institutions, styles, you know, housing locations, neighborhoods, all sprung up in a way of distinguishing, like, this is old money and refinement and class, and this is new money, which is kind of like in contradiction to old money. So gaudy, ridiculous, all these other things. And so a lot of the new money at that time was trying to figure out ways to winnow themselves into this old money style that kind of would distinguish them from being new money to old money. It could be done by marriage in some cases, to get that like kind of long lineage of existence in the country. Or it could be done, I guess, by learning the social rules. But there were always kinds of these designs and like styles that kind of said, oh, nope, you're not old money. And so a lot of people could never really get into that until they existed in those circles for long enough to be finally a part of it. And I would argue still probably experience like a bit of isolation, but over time maybe that isolation lessened. And one famous example of this was a heiress at the time who was from old money. Her name was Caroline Astor, lived in New York and saw kind of this influx of new money onto the social scene. And new money, because it was new money, but it was also a lot of money. And so old money, had this money that had existed for a while, but new money had a lot of money, kind of like a ridiculous amount of money, to where they could come into these social circles and afford the styles and everything else, because they in some cases had way more money than old money. And so instead of being about what you could buy, it was your the way you walked or the way you talked or where you went to school when you were 9 and all these other things, and kind of ways of distinguishing people from that. And the 400 was a list that Carolyn Astor developed of like the people worth knowing in New York at the time. And so it was like this famous list of people who were considered, social icons or elegant or like real society, refined society. And it famously excluded a lot of new money from this list and included old money as a way of distinguishing itself from them. And it also, instituted kind of these standards of behavior that were exemplified by this group to distinguish itself from others. And so basically it was not only like a monetary protection, but a social protection against kind of the mixing of these new monies with their money, and also distinguishing themselves from the lower classes. But I think it's given enough talk to kind of go into why I think quiet luxury is not for me, and I personally hate it. And I think it's because that's literally what it is today. This idea has existed, like if you went back to like the 1970s, there was the same concept, probably still called old money, but now it's called quiet luxury, and it's kind of this idea of like, oh, this is how you are really refined, and it's not color, it's not, what we would term stylish to us. In all a quiet luxury, like it's just kind of above us unless we want to go into that more muted direction. And I would say that I am wary of any trend that defines itself by what it is not rather than what it is. And I feel like these sorts of trends like old money, quiet luxury always have what they are not, and kind of use what they are not to make themselves better than explaining what they are. For example, like maximalism or such. I think it's interesting too, because I think a lot of people don't understand what quiet luxury really is, even because I did see a few kind of content videos on how to get affordable quiet luxury items. And to me that seems kind of funny, because it's like quiet luxury isn't affordable. That's the point. The point is the distinction that even though these items are very regular and very basic, they're still not affordable to the regular individual. So for example, you couldn't go to, like, let's say H&M and find a quiet luxury appropriate top, because that's not quiet luxury. It's supposed to be luxurious but not appear to be. So it tends to ally itself with a lot of brands such as, and forgive me if I say these wrong, Hermes, Bottega Veneta, Celine, Zegna, and then Mulberry, and some I would assume like more affordable brands to some, still not all, would be like Hunter Boots, because that tends to kind of be a good brand that quiet luxury enthusiasts like to go to. But even those brands, I think, would run you at least $100 for something from those places, unless it was very, very small. And so I think a lot of people who want to participate in this brand and kind of embody this persona don't realize that they still could not be in this trend, because of it's not necessarily how you look, it's all of it. The price, the tailoring, all of it. And so it is supposed to be exclusionary, and is supposed to be difficult for you to attain as whatever, if you cannot regularly afford these items. And I would say some good examples of people in quiet luxury would be Gwyneth Paltrow, or I did kind of think of I forget her name right now, Megan, oh gosh, I forgot her last name. Anyway, the one who married the royal. And I think I don't necessarily think I don't think she's ever spoken to being into quiet luxury, but I would say her look is very quiet luxury, because it does tend to be very simple items that are quite expensive. Not all the time. There do tend to be like some Zara items in there, but for the most part, like the sweaters and things, if you look up the prices, they could run you about $700. So I would say that to me would seem to be more quiet luxury. And in some cases, I do think, like for example, the way the British royal is dressed, I do think in some cases it can be very nice, but I think as a philosophy of style, it is very exclusionary and just kind of prides itself in being above everything else. And honestly, for me, as someone who loves color, I'm like, where's the joy in that? Where's the expression, beyond just like your tailoring and these simple outfits? I do really love a pop of color and a crazy print paired with something else, and kind of working those things together. So for me personally, it would never fit for me. And I also think one benefit of not being in those circles or those classes that do properly engage in quiet luxury is that style, I think, is something that doesn't come from those classes. I think it's something that's kind of born out of ingenuity because, for example, you cannot get to this. And so I think it does inspire creation in more bizarre and fun ways. And I think those kind of cycle up and then are adopted. But I think the real creation comes from normal people and normal people wearing their clothes, especially in different ways, because you may not have the money to buy new items every year or to buy new shoes all the time, and so you do become more creative with your wardrobe, and that in turn inspires these different design styles and trends that people hop on and that eventually become culture and then get cycled up, and then those are things of refinement. So I think it's kind of a backwards way of, dressing. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it. I feel like this was more of a ramble than me being very distinctive about anything, but that's just how I feel. And to be more frank, I just think it's an exclusionist kind of fashion ideology, and I think fashion in some cases does tend to be very free and open, but in other cases it does tend to be very exclusionary, and the wearing of certain items is privileged in order for it to have more value, and depending on who can wear it and not wear it is kind of what defines it as being quality or class. And I think the more people who can afford to wear something in some circles means that it is less quality and less attractive as a fashion. And I because of those ideas, I highly distance myself from that. I do not ascribe to that kind of fashion idea. I think fashion is expressed by everyone differently, and I think it should all be taken into account, and I think that's what makes it fun. And I'm for the fun part of fashion, not for a rule book of like, oh, you can't wear brown and black together, or if you don't get this item from here, it's worthless. I think everything is worth trying, even junk. So, and I think even the idea of what is junk is interesting, depending on who you talk to. And I know in my own personal style, I tend to dress pretty out there to people just because of the colors I match together and how I put things together. But my fun is finding ways to make colors that shouldn't go together. So I definitely think if someone who is in the quiet luxury trend went through my wardrobe, they would be very disappointed. But yeah, I genuinely don't really use the hate word very often, but I do hate this trend. And I did read an article recently saying that maximalism was taking over again and that quiet luxury was kind of dying. And I was very happy about that. And I also think it's because the average person cannot be into quiet luxury. Like, if it's affordable, it's not luxury. So, it could be quiet, but it's not luxury. So, it could be a demure outfit, but if it doesn't hit that tier, and if, someone who is from that class wouldn't recognize the tailoring of your skirt and know that it's, a Prada item, then you're not in the circle. So, but kudos to everyone who's giving it a shot. I think have fun with it, but I don't really think there's much fun to be had with it because it does seem very restrictive. But okay, I'm done rambling. I'm done giving my opinion. I was really excited to talk about this. I hope I did it justice, and I hope people are like, girl, she didn't say nothing this whole video. But I do plan on doing lots of videos of like this, giving my opinion on things, unsolicited of course, but I'm gonna do it because it's the internet and it's free. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please share your comments and how you feel about this trend down below, and how you see if it's still trending or if it's kind of going away, what you think. I do think it is recession core. I think it is very much a recession trend, and I think it kind of stems from people kind of becoming more stringent and then wanting to feel still like exclusionish. So they're like, okay, I'm buying limited items because I'm quiet luxury. And it's like, no, that's not why people would actually do quiet luxury or why old money would buy that way. But okay. Anyway, that's my thoughts. Nice talking to everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I already said that, but I'll repeat. And let me know how you feel about this dress. It's so cute. I would do a twirl, but I don't feel like getting up. So have a nice day. Bye. This is Bougie and Pink.